Good afternoon. Back with another episode of the Lord of the Rings LCG Progression Series card review of the second Hobbit box, On the Doorstep. Not as good as the first box, but there's some interesting cards here. So let's take a look. The first hero, Bowman, 9 threat, 2/1/2, 4 health. Pay 1 resource from Bowman's resource pool to cancel a shadow effect just triggered during an attack, then deal the attacking enemy another shadow card once per attack. Okay. Well, first things first, the stats are not good. He's understated like most of the dwarves. Even with Dane, he's not good. And to play him with Dane, you'd have to run dual leadership. I'm not sure that's a problem. But you're not playing him for his stats. So if you're playing him for the effect, and the effect is, well, it varies from quest to quest. So I just played through the Heirs of Numenor quests, and in those quests there's some nasty shadow effects. However, canceling a shadow effect and then dealing another shadow card often wouldn't do anything at all, because it felt like in those quests, shadow card duds were pretty rare. So, and most of the shadow cards were interchangeable, and some variation of give more shadow cards to the enemy and maybe a +1 damage. So in that quest, canceling a shadow card and then dealing another one would offer no benefit. If his text read cancel a shadow card for 1 resource or maybe even 2, that would be good. But there's too big of a chance that you will, in some quests at least, that you'll cancel a shadow effect and trigger another shadow effect that's nearly identical, and you will have done nothing at all except waste 1 resource. And play a hero who's understated for a ability which then did nothing. There's some quests where there's nasty shadow cards and a lot more blanks, and he could be good there, but he's going to be swingy because sometimes, again, you're just going to get another shadow card. But if against an encounter deck where there's some really nasty shadow effects and they're kind of on the rare side, it could be good if you didn't want to play Hasty Stroke or the Dunedain guy that cancels them. I don't think this hero's good. He needs more stats. The ability that he has doesn't justify his low stats. Next up, we have Bard the Bowman, 11 threat, 2/3/2, 4 health, so he's almost good when it comes to stats, but not quite. Ranged, that's nice sometimes. When Bard the Bowman makes a ranged attack, the enemy he attacks gets -2 shields until the end of the phase. That's fantastic. So he has a built-in Rivendell bow and he's making a ranged attack. It's not good for solo though, because in solo you're rarely making a ranged attack. There are starting to be some tactics cards that specify that an attack will be ranged, but if you were playing him in multiplayer and shooting over at your friends' engagement areas, that's fantastic. But in solo it's not good because there's not enough ranged attacks, and he's just slightly understated, and he's slightly understated because of his fantastic ability. But it's not a good ability in solo because ranged attacks are rare. Unfortunate. I like the card. Great card in ranged. I'd consider it in almost any deck I was running tactics in multiplayer, not ranged. Great attack in multiplayer. Consider it in almost any tactics deck in multiplayer. Because you get 2 cards for 1, the free Rivendell bow on your ranged attacks. Owen, Spirit Hero, 8 threat, 2/1/1. When you control at least 5 dwarf characters, Owen gets +1 attack and the tactics icon. So he's understated. He's not even good stats with Dane. Even with the +1 attack, he's understated. He's not going to fulfill any of the major roles for you. Questing, battle, or shields. And so if you play him, it would be for that tactics resource icon. What is the tactics resource icon worth? It's worth 1 resource and a card. What is it worth to start with the tactics resource icon? Well, you wouldn't, because you need to get 5 dwarf characters out. So I'd value that ability at about 1 resource and a card. I mean, Elrond gives you a lot more than that out of lore for higher threat, and he's not a dwarf. I do not think the strength of that ability justifies his low stats. Similar to Bowman, he is understated on purpose because of his ability, and I guess because of dwarf synergy, but I don't think that the ability is strong enough to justify his stats, his low stats. So if I was running a spirit dwarf, it would not be Owen. It would be the spirit dwarf from the first Hobbit box, whose name escapes me at the moment because all of the dwarves have similar names, but that dwarf hero I liked a little bit more. Dwarves are getting increasingly underwhelming. I didn't even try them against Heirs of Numenor quests. Bomber, 8 threat, 012. What, 012? 5 health. When counting the number of dwarf characters you control, Bomber counts as 2. Okay, that's funny. Well, it's funny, but not really necessary, because most of the time you can just mulligan for Keely or Feely, and then you have 2 right away. You play this if you really, really need the dwarf to hit the 5 dwarf limit on like turn 1 or turn 2 maybe. Probably turn 1 is what you'd play this for, and then you'd run the 1 cost Lord Dwarf. Maybe even dual Lord Dwarves. But the stats, my gosh. You're just giving up a character in order to get to that 5 dwarf character limit faster. So there better be some fantastic 5 dwarf procs in this set to justify that, because those stats are awful. So far, all 3 of the dwarves have been understated in my opinion. I think maybe they're overestimating the strength of the abilities, or maybe there's some synergy coming that justifies it. Let's see. Glowin, dwarf allies, new version of Glowin. 3 costs, 2/1/1. While you control at least 5 dwarf characters, so you have to control 5 first. Glowin gains response after you play Glowin from your hand. Choose a hero, add 2 resources to that hero's resource pool. So if you already control 5 dwarf characters, you get him for 1 cost. He's great at 1 cost. I think I would run this in a dwarf deck if I wasn't running Glowin, because you can reliably get to 5 dwarf characters. But it's a slower card, because you'd have to play, probably, realistically, you'd be mulliganing for Keely or Feely. Then you'd be playing it, and then you'd be playing Glowin next turn for... But the thing is, you would need to play Keely and Feely, and then you have to save up 3 resources again, and then you can play him. So the requirement isn't just that you control at least 5 dwarf characters, you also have to have 3 resources in order to play him for 1 resource. And the ability to choose which hero you give the resources to is inconsequential to me, although it has niche uses. This is a good card, but it's a slow card. And slow cards in solo are weak, because, as you've seen in multiple quests, if you've been watching my series, there is often a wall that you have to get over right away, and solo has trouble getting over that wall because the wall is kind of constructed for 2 players or more, and we're solo, and so you have to play the very best heroes and cards available in order to get over that wall turn 1, which if you can't do, you just lose a lot of the time. And Glowin's not going to do anything for you there. He's too slow for that. The dwarves in general are all too slow to help you get over the wall. And if you played something like Bomber to help you get over it faster, he's so understated that you're giving up a lot to do it. So I haven't seen anything to make the dwarves stronger early game, which is their big weakness in solo play. As for multiplayer, they remain strong as ever in my estimation. Biffer, 3 cost, 1/1, 3 health. While you control at least 5 dwarf characters, Biffer gains. After you play Biffer from your hand, draw 2 cards. Okay. Again. Well, so he's not understated. 3 cost for 3 attack when you have Dane is nice. He's a slow card, again, because you have to control at least 5 dwarf characters, so you gotta get Keely or Feely out. At least he's not from the same sphere as Keely or Feely, so you can get him, you could realistically play them on the same turn. But he's slow, because he's turn 3. He doesn't help the dwarves with their early game weakness in solo play. But he's a fine card in a dwarf deck. I'd run him in a lore dwarf deck. I'd run Glowin in a leadership dwarf deck. I would probably not run any of the dwarf heroes. Unless there's something that really good early that you could use Bomber with, like turn 1 or turn 2, is what I mean by early. That would compensate for the dwarves' early game weakness. Dwalin, 3 cost, 1/1/2, so he's understated. Sentinel, while you control at least 5 dwarf characters, lower the cost to play Dwalin by 2. So he's properly statted if you control at least 5 dwarf characters, like Glowin, but he's a little bit faster than Glowin because you don't need... Well, no, he's not. He's not any faster than Glowin. He's nearly the same as Glowin, except he has 2 shields instead of 2 questing. Okay. And Sentinel, which doesn't matter in solo. Okay. So, yeah, what I said about Glowin is almost exactly the same as what I'd say about Dwalin. I'd play him in a Spirit Dwarf deck, but he doesn't help the dwarves with their early game weakness. Straight Shot. 0 cost, exhaust a weapon attachment. To choose a non-unique enemy with 0 shields, discard the chosen enemy. That's great, but there's not a lot of enemies with 0 shields. So you might have to combo it with Rivendell Blade, and mostly your guy with Rivendell Blade just kills stuff himself on turn 1, so that's not good. Unless you're really having trouble with some enemy that's come out or is going to come out that has 0 shields, but like high health or something. So, niche at best. Seems good when you first glance at it, but it's niche because there's not that many enemies with 0 shields. And it specifies non-unique. So you can't, for example, in the Smog fight, you can't, like, or, let's see, the Balrog maybe, you can't, like, reduce its shields to 0 with dual Rivendell Blades, the way I did in my video, and then play this to discard it because it's unique. So they did specify to avoid abusing it that way. So it's too niche. 0 cost, Desperate Alliance. Choose a hero you control until the end of the phase. Give control of that hero and all resources in that hero's resource pool to another player. Well, obviously not a card you're going to run in solo. In multiplayer, would you use it? It's fun. Fun card. Yeah, there could be a use for this. Because there's powerful cards that you can't play early to help you with early game challenges because you lack resources. This can be a way to transfer resources so that one player can play a more powerful card if the other player doesn't have anything to do early. Could have uses in certain strategies in multiplayer, obviously bad in solo. I could see some interesting combos with this potentially, if you mulligan for it in your opening hand. Could be interesting in multiplayer. Ravens of the Mountain. 1 cost, exhaust a hero you control to shuffle the encounter deck and look at his top card. Place progress tokens on the current quest equal to the threat of the card you looked at, then put that card back on top of the encounter deck. What a terrible, terrible card. Okay, so first of all, exhausting a hero is a huge cost. And you get progress tokens on the current quest equal to the threat of the card you've looked at. The only use I can see for this card is if you have a monster of an active location in your way and you only need 1 or 2 quest progress to get past the phase, and somehow that helps you or to complete the game. That's so niche though. Most of the time though, if you need progress tokens, just commit the hero to the quest and then you don't need a card or to pay 1 resource. So you're looking for a use in which committing the hero to the quest isn't good, but you're usually going to get like 2, maybe 3 progress tokens out of this. So 1 card and 1 resource for 2 or 3 progress tokens in a situation where you couldn't accomplish the same thing by just exhausting a hero. It's so incredibly niche. Very niche card. Same as Straight Shot. Very niche. To me, oh my kinsfolk. If you control at least 1 dwarf hero, put a dwarf ally from your discard pile into play under your control. Put that ally on the bottom of your deck at the end of the phase. Well, you're not going to have dwarves in your discard pile that often, because we don't design our decks to get dwarves into the discard pile. It might happen from time to time, but most of the time this card would just sit in your hand because there's nothing in your discard pile for it to use. If you got a lot of dwarves in your discard pile and you find, it's not going to be that often that playing it for 1 turn is going to help you. It's a thematic card. Very thematic. That's probably why it exists. But it's going to sit in the hand so much that, again, it's niche. Very niche. What I'm seeing in this expansion so far, the general theme, is understated dwarves for the ability that they provide, slow dwarves such as Glowin, Biffer, and Dwalin that are good but they're slow, and then very niche cards with this interesting co-op card and a very good multiplayer card. So 2 good multiplayer cards, understated dwarves with effects that don't justify it, decent allies that are slow, and then very niche cards. 3 very niche cards. Pretty terrible expansion for solo players right now. Very multiplayer focused, because slow cards are only good in multiplayer. These 2 are multiplayer focused, and these are understated for their abilities. So very weak expansion for solo players. The first Hobbit box was phenomenal for solo players. This one, so far, not so much. Great Yew Bow. 2 cost, attached to a hero with the printed ranged keyword. Restricted. Combat action. Choose an enemy in the staging area, exhaust Great Yew Bow, and attached hero to make a ranged attack against the enemy. Okay, so it specifies the ranged attack, so Bard's ability would apply. Declare attached hero as the attacker. No other attackers can be declared for that attack, so attacking enemies in the staging area as a combat action isn't that good, because most of the strategies that I make, most of the decks are built to deal with each enemy that comes out each turn. They're built to engage each new enemy that comes out each turn optionally or involuntarily or whatever, and then kill at the same turn, which means by the time you get to the combat phase, most of the time there's no enemies in the staging area. Would you purposely leave an enemy in the staging area to take advantage of Bard the Bowman's ability? From time to time, that would be good. But you're not going to run Bard the Bowman just for Great Yew Bow in solo, because it's slow. It'd be good, but it's slow. It'd be good, but you'd have to purposely strategize to make it good. You'd have to keep your threat low so that enemies would stay in the staging area. There'd only be a certain number of enemies that have that option, because a lot of enemies come out with low threat costs and you really are engaging them no matter what. And Bard the Bowman's kind of higher threat, so he doesn't lend himself well to that. So this seems good, but its uses will be limited, which means it's a niche card because a lot of the time it's going to do nothing, because you've designed your deck not to make use of it most of the time. Could you theoretically design a deck or have a use for it in a deck in the future which is not designed to engage enemies with a ranged hero? In that circumstance, if you had a hero that was good at attacking solo, like Bard the Bowman or some future enemy, and your deck was designed not to engage enemies right away, then this could be good. In that circumstance, it's a little expensive, but it could be good in that circumstance. But I don't think you play Bard just for that, because most of the time in solo you're not making use of his ability, and you're not going to make use of his ability all the time. And I can't imagine a deck designed not to engage enemies that includes Bard because of his high threat. So this is another niche card. Black Arrow, limit 1 per deck, so already it's niche because you're not going to use it that much, which means you can't rely on it, which means you're not accounting for it in your strategies since it's a 1 in 50. Attached to a hero with ranged. After attached hero declares an attack, add Black Arrow to the victory display to give attached hero +5 for this attack. If I wanted a big attack for a turn, I'd play Bjorn or a way to get Bjorn out, because he offers much more stats, like with Villia or Sneak Attack or something like that. This card, I don't like one-offs because they're luck-based, unreliable, unless some card comes out in the future that allows you to grab this from your deck. This is another limited use card. Good effect, but limited use because it's a one-off. 3-off, it's a fantastic card, but that's why it's not 3-off. Thrower's Key, 1 cost attached to a hero. After a location is added to the staging area, attach Thrower's Key to that location, so you don't get to choose what this goes on. While attached to a location, Thrower's Key gains treat attached locations, printed text boxes blank. It'd be pretty good if you could choose which location it goes on. Since you can't choose, a lot of the time it's going to go on a location that you don't really care about, doing nothing to. I don't think this is good unless every location in the encounter deck is nasty. So far I haven't seen that. I'll keep it in mind if that should happen in the future, like a nightmare deck or something, but right now this is too niche. I'm saying that over and over again, this expansion, but it's been true each time. Niche meaning limited use, and therefore sometimes does nothing, and sometimes does nothing is terrible. Expert Treasure Hunter. Sometimes does nothing means you need a phenomenal effect when it does something to justify it. And this is good effect, but not phenomenal. Phenomenal means like you win the game. If a card sometimes does nothing, then I need it to win me the game when it does something. Then I'll play it. This doesn't win you the game. It's helpful, but it doesn't win you the game. Like a very good tail, there's a chance that does nothing. But when it does something, wow, does it do something. And you build like a strong start, and then you just demolish the encounter deck. That's the kind of thing I'm talking about when I say it needs to do something strong to justify the times it does nothing. I also played a card in my most recent deck, the Eagles Are Coming, I think it is, which did nothing when I played it. But I was really just testing that out. I don't know if it's good. It probably isn't in that deck. But the situation in which you're looking for Winged Guardian in that deck is so good. Like, that can win you the game if you had support of the Eagles and Winged Guardian. So you had support of the Eagles, but you didn't have Winged Guardian yet, and then you search for it with the Eagles Are Coming and find it, and then you just win that quest. because you've added 8 questing power to your side. That's the kind of situation I'm looking for when a card might do nothing in order to include it. And this is helpful, but not that. So it's niche. Expert Treasure Hunter. Attached to a hero, limit 1 per hero. 0 cost. After attached hero quest successfully, name a card type and discard the top card of your deck. If the discarded card is a named type, take it into your hand. So allies are typically like half the deck-ish, maybe a little less. So each time you quest successfully, you discard a card from the top of your deck. If it's an ally, so like 40% of the time you quest successfully, you draw a card. Okay. If you played this on turn 1, it's good. If you played this turn 2 through 5 or so, it's okay. Any later than that, it's bad. You can play 1 per hero. It's not bad. Sometimes you're going to discard something you didn't want to. It's luck-based. It's going to be swingy. But on average, it's not bad. At 0 cost, it might be better than other card draw alternatives sometimes. It's worth a look. It doesn't save the expansion, but this isn't a terrible card if you know your deck. And you've got a hero that's going to be questing successfully a lot. And you get it early. Yeah, it's not bad. Might try it out if I play lore. I don't know if it's good enough to warrant inclusion over other lore cards that you might play. Be like a card where, well, if I wanted card draw, I probably wouldn't play this. I'd play that one that discards 2 cards and draws 1. I think that's better. Or I'd try for a card that draws 3 or something like that. So this is probably overshadowed, even though it's not terrible. Because of the swinginess. I like cards that you know what they're going to do every time. I like to take luck out of the game, not introduce more luck into it. Unless the effect is so powerful that it wins you the game. Because again, sometimes this is going to do nothing. King Under the Mountain. 2 cost, attached to a dwarf hero. Exhaust King Under the Mountain to look at the top 2 cards of your deck. Add 1 to your hand and discard the other. So Ancient Mathem costs 1 resource to draw you 3 cards. I think this needs to draw 6 cards to be good. Now there is a value to being able to choose from the top 2 cards of your deck. What is that worth? That's hard to quantify. It's not worth nothing. Hard to quantify though. It's expensive at 2 cost. But looking at the top 2 cards and choosing one, that's worth something. What is it worth? Say you got it out on turn 2 and you used it every turn from then. It's good. Probably good. Alright, well let's say instead of drawing 6 cards for 2 costs, you need to draw 4 when you get to choose them, because it's more valuable cards on average. So if you got it out turn 1 through 3, it could be good. Later than that, you probably wouldn't have time to take advantage of it. It's good, but like the dwarf cards in this expansion, all of them, except for the heroes, which aren't good, it's slow. Doesn't help the dwarves with their early game weakness. It could be good, though, in a long enough game. Man, why are all these dwarves built for long games? Okay, well, Not a good expansion for solo players. I'd skip it if you're looking just for the cards for solo play. I don't see anything here that makes the dwarves better in solo. And you got the best card in the expansion, Bard, is a multiplayer card. So, not good for solo players, unfortunately. I may still try to play a dwarves deck for the 3 quests for this and see how it goes. But I do expect a Bjorn-based deck that I'll make will be better. So, thanks for watching.